Hi everyone, I'm Lloyd. Welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to do something a little bit different. As you may know, I got a little Monoprice SLA printer not too long ago and promptly kind of wrecked the sheet that's inside there. So today I want to go through and replace the FEP sheet that sits on the VAT. They look like this. And that little piece of plastic is quite easy to damage. So they recommend using plastic spatulas to scrape the bottom vats. This can and will scratch and or damage the vat lining at some point. Monoprice charges about $45 to $50 plus shipping for one of these replacement vats. Truth is, all you need is FEP plastic. If we take these apart, take apart these little screws, and then take out the two, I guess it is technically a hex nut, which should separate the layers and let us remove the FEP film. We'll dig into this and get started. Alright, so first thing I'm going to do, put some gloves on, get some cloths ready. We're going to wipe everything down. We'll take all the bolts out, replace the film, put it all back together, and run the machine. But first things first, gloves. So first thing I'm going to do is take apart the obvious pieces, the plate. And during the cleaning process, you want to make sure any of the old prints that are stuck on there are off. And this resin tray. So I'm going to drain the vat. And there's a bunch of different ways you can do this. In my case, I'm going to use kind of a strainer that's metallic with some fine holes in it. And I'm just going to pour it in here. And just wait for a moment. There we go. I'll put that to the side. So now I'll put this here as well, and I'm just going to start cleaning and sanitizing everything. To do this, I am going to use two different products. I have some isopropyl alcohol. This one's only 70%. It's not going to quite clean everything perfectly, so I'll also follow up afterwards with some acetone. There you go. So you can't see it very well, but right here is where there's big scratches and grooves in the FEP plastic. Right from where it sits on here, so there's like a little groove between the two where the little tape or whatever goes in. And so when I'm scraping, that tends to peel up underneath it, and now it's created a big bump. And that big bump isn't resin, that big bump is actually damaged plastic. You can tell by feeling underneath and feeling it's indented, feeling it's overdented. I put some water or some alcohol in here. I'm just going to wipe everything down once, get everything good and wet, and just start cleaning. One thing I've noticed is that the 70% never seems to take the stuff completely off of my screen, so we're going to see if acetone will do that. I'm going to keep cleaning and scrubbing at this until it comes clean, and I will see you all in a bit. Try to scrape up some of that resin using a scraper. I'm going for plastic, that way I don't hopefully damage anything, although as you've seen that doesn't always manage to be the case. Just be aware, if you aren't careful, you will start to peel up that tape around the outside, and that's not something you want to do. With a razor blade you can pick up things like resin that's really baked into something, but again, just remember that there's a tape around the outside of this, and as soon as you damage that, you're probably going to end up having to replace this whole thing. So I'm going to go ahead and very carefully get in here and work on this and just kind of keep getting it cleaner. Some of the ways that this can build up. Keep in mind, I've only had this printer like a day. I use my rubbing alcohol to clean the tray, and then the tray gets put on here. That rubbing alcohol still has a little bit of resin in the alcohol that ends up going between the two layers. So when you do clean your plate and clean the bottom of your resin tray, just make sure that you use fresh rubbing alcohol and a fresh sheet. Don't use something that's already slightly dirty. Otherwise, you'll get a small little film and become a hardened layer. So that looks good. Okay, so I've done a pretty thorough cleaning. Do one last run at some of these things. And in actual fact, if I wanted this perfect, I should ideally let this sit in alcohol overnight. I sanitized these two off camera, so I'm just down to finishing the sanitization of this piece, and then we're going to replace the film. So I'm going to do one more step on my tray that might seem a little unusual, but just to be safe. And there, now you can kind of see better the scuff mark. And that lines up with the edge of this tray, just because I'm a little hard on things. You can see there's one on the other side where the other side of the tray goes. Just the way life is sometimes. But what I'm going to do is just do a clear. And now this one, we're going to go ahead and loosen these and separate these two layers. Watch for the springs that are being used to keep tension on the two trays. And we'll see if we can replace this film ourselves. So you should have gotten this little accessories kit. If not, these are easy to find everywhere. Interestingly enough, these are different sizes. So you want to use the bigger Allen wrench of the two. I can see the springs loosening, but they don't pop, which is nice. I've had it for maybe a day or two, maybe a little longer, but I've only used it for the first day, and then this film kind of wrecked things. So I can feel in there is actually a little bit of resin buildup. I'm going to do the smart thing and take these out, because before we reassemble everything, I'm going to clean it down one more time because I'm already starting to see resin coming up. So there we go. All right. Now in here is the resin sheet, and you can see it's kind of compressed between two sheets. And now that the pressure's off, this sheet's a lot looser. So let's keep going. There we go. So there is the old film. We got to clean and sanitize all of this, and that'll take a minute. So something small to watch out for when you're flipping this around is there's 4 little nuts that sit in those corners that fall out. So I popped those out. The ones on the bottom haven't come loose on me yet, but they probably would if you gave it half a chance. Okay, now I'm going to clean my FEP. The company I bought this from cost me a fortune, and what they sent me was covered in fingerprints and hair and cloth. We're going to take our middle piece. That's our middle width piece. I'm going to make sure that all the washers, or sorry, the nuts are in that side, and then I'm going to put the 4 back on this side. Okay. Now, because this has some depth to it, I'm going to put something in the middle to take some pressure off. Put my FEP sheet in here. It's now got a little lip around the outside. So with that sheet in place, we're then going to put this on. We're going to go ugly side up. So this ugly side and this ugly side are both going to face upwards. Squish that in there good. You should have some pressure and tension in there. And these holes should reach to the little nuts on the other side. Pin prick. To get it through. Then you'll remember that you have a couple of big and a couple of small. This one is going to be small ones. Now you want to go gently because otherwise you'll pop those little nuts out on the other side. And that's not something you want to do right now. And you'll notice I'm going from opposite corners. And just remember to be gentle in this process because last thing you want to do is pop the FEP sheet to replace the FEP sheet that was broken before. And there's our sheet. Now I'm going to do one more test I've seen online that I think is actually a pretty cool idea. So one option, if you want to try to make this perfect, is to get something that has a frequency graph. And there you can try and get the sound where you need it to be able to determine that you have kind of equal pressure all across the board. Now in my case, I'm going to go ahead and just start tightening these because I can feel myself that they're pretty close to each other. I might have to tighten up this side a little bit. And I can tighten that up right now. And I'm actually going to poke these as I go, trying to make sure that I have a good amount of tension in there. There we go. Yeah, see, that's good and tight. And what I'm doing is, as I'm going around, I'm feeling if it feels tense enough, because if it doesn't, then I'll pull it good and tight. If it's feeling pretty good, I won't pull it really at all. I'm just trying to make sure I'm doing my due diligence on some of these. But the other one's putting some pressure on to try to straighten out that sheet. All right. There we go. Now, if we're happy all around, and I think I am, I'm going to do my cleanup. So we're going to trim the outside. I'm going to just use an X-Acto knife for that. Again, this is where you want to actually be careful, because this is where it's really easy to accidentally tear your new FEP. So there we go. Much tighter skin, but it's not perfectly flat on there, and that's where this tightening comes in. So just like before, I'm going to try and do these on opposite corners. And last but not least, we've got this whole thing in there. This is the final piece that will put more pressure on and push that a little bit flat. So, don't be worried if it doesn't sit perfectly flat yet. This adjustment piece is meant to make up that difference. So getting this back together, however, is a little tricky. I suppose the way that it makes sense to do this is one at a time. Put our springs back on. Great. Lower this in. Again, we want the FEP side as close to this direction as you can get it. And hopefully you're a little smarter than me and don't drop 2 screws. And if I'm super gentle, they should go right back where they were supposed to be. All right. Now, I'm going to tighten this. But only until I get resistance. Same with this side. Tighten it. Only until I feel resistance. Repeat the process over here. Get resistance. Get resistance. So, now for the alignment part of the problem. So let's go ahead and put this back in place just for a moment. And if you get resistance, those two I'm just going to poke through. Okay. So that should now be more or less locked into place. Now I can feel that it's not touching the glass. So I'm going to softly close these up, because now these are putting pressure on too. Good, great. Because I feel a tiny air gap in there. And I'm looking at the bottom. When I push down, I'm making sure it sticks to that. I can see it stick to the sheet. Again, this is a new sheet, so it shouldn't really have any problems, but if it does, now is the time you want to find out. Cool. And just like that, there you go. A brand new bed. And let's just make sure we can see through okay. No problems whatsoever. Alright, so now that that is complete and we're happy with it, I'm going to take some resin. In this case, the resin that I filtered at the beginning. And it did get some goop in there, so it's a good thing we filtered it. Alright, so the resin's been replaced. I'm going to go ahead and put the mounting plate on. And there we go. Time for a test print. Let's see how this goes. Alright, we've got the print running. I'm going to go ahead. We've already checked that the UV lights were working. We've put the new resin in. We've checked to make sure it isn't leaking. Everything's great. Everything's clean right now, so it's kind of nice. I don't have to wear gloves all the time. But we'll let this run for a bit, come back, and check on the print. This one will take, I think it takes about 40 minutes to an hour. And we'll come back and see if the replacement FEP worked out the way that we hoped it would. Alright, and we're now back. It's a new day. I've spent some time playing with my dog. I'm going to now check and see how our print did. Let us see how this works, or how this looks. Dun dun dun! Woo! And success! So there we go. A successful swap on the FEP film. So thank you. If you want to see more videos like this, please comment, like, or subscribe. Yeah, I don't know why people say that. If you're going to do that, you do that already.